So, Mike, thank you for being here today.
Oh, Jasper, my pleasure. It's good to be here.
So, could you tell us about yourself and your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I've kind of come to this industry, through a level of interest in natural resources and entrepreneurship that probably started when I was in my teens. My grandfather and my dad had natural resources business, not hard rock mining, but actually peat mining in Canada, and they had projects in the United States and things like that. As I was growing up, I had the kind of an interest in precious metals instilled in me by my father. And so I started investing quite young, probably around 13 or 14, when I, saved up money from odd jobs and birthday parties and that type of thing, buying silver and gold coins. And so that's probably where that interest in precious metals started early on. And then as I went to university, I studied business. I studied a Bachelor in Commerce from Royal Roads in Canada. And I started to really understand the market here in Vancouver for junior mining companies and mining companies, and I was always quite fascinated by that. It seemed like a continuation of the interest that I had, younger as a teenager. So when I graduated school, I started out with an internship at Pretium. And from there, I worked with the family office that was in Vancouver that was looking to do investments in the natural resource space. Of course, that was at the very top of the market. This was like 2010, 2011. And so I got to see the absolute pinnacle and the frenzy and all of that. And of course, that's when I invested all of my money at the very top. And, the following 5, 6 years were pretty difficult, but I worked for an exploring company in Mexico during that period of time, and really set out to, while the market was quiet, I set out to build my network, really understand how deals were put together, what made projects good, and in that, it was a quest to find the right mentors. So I was very fortunate. I met Craig Perry in the mid 2010s, and through that, I met Simon Smirlik as well. And both those gentlemen are involved in Vizsla. Of course, Simon's our chief operating officer, and Craig was our chairman. And I really wanted to work with those gentlemen, and so I initially started a cobalt company with Craig. I sold that company, or Craig and I sold that company in 2016, 2017, somewhere around then, and started Vizsla. At the time, Vizsla Resources was a $2 million IPO, 15-cent share price at the IPO. We brought Simon on as a director, Craig on as chairman, and then we kind of grew from there and ended up acquiring the Panuco district in 2019. So that's kind of an abridged history of my career.
So, yeah, speaking of the team, actually, you have beefed up the team over the years. Would you say that you now more or less have a team to execute on building Panuco? Of course, with the help of contractors, Ausenco, etc.
Well, we actually probably, including the contractors, have almost all the pieces that we need. We're still hiring a couple of people. There's a few openings that we'd like to fill and some new roles that we'd like to create to help. But really, with Simon's oversight and the team that we have at the operating test mine right now, including the contractors, and then with Ausenco's help in terms of the engineering and the various construction consultants that we'll avail ourselves with, we are fairly well staffed. In a sense, we're probably ready to go right now. If we were to receive our permits, we'd be ready to start construction.
So let's speak about financing first. So you raised 115 million USD with over allotment. So could you give us the rationale for why now and why 115 million?
Well, 115 million now brings our total to about 215 million. And if you recall, the capex that we have in the PEA, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later, but that capex number is about 224 million, and that's a number that we feel comfortable with. We think we'll continue into the feasibility. We wanted to get ourselves as close to that number as possible, and then of course we have Vizsla Royalty equity, so we're very close to having that capex number covered. However, problems arise in this business when you're underfunded and you have a capex and you're going in through the the construction period, it's much better to be overcapitalized than to cut it too short and have issues due to lack of liquidity. So, we are in the process of doing project finance, non-dilutive project finance as well. So we wanted to give ourselves the best advantage when it comes to negotiating that, that we could. And, we follow Silvercrest, of course. Silvercrest did a really good job of always raising equity when there was an opportunity to do that at continually higher prices. And we have a great chart in our presentation that shows, how each financing in history has been accretive to the shareholders. So, this is an example of this. We had some very high value, very strong shareholders that were interested in participating in equity financing. In a sense, you could think that we kind of tested the market a little bit with the VROI financing a month or so prior, and noticed that there was very quality, high demand from high quality names. And when you have that happen in a business where you're not cash flowing, there are risks. Of course, it's not a risk-free business. It's always good to take money when it's available from very good sources. And as far as the amount and of course the over allotment, this was a number that we discussed with the board and our team and made sure that it was the right number for us. And I think this allows us to unlock a lot of the opportunities ahead of us, whether it's a test mine, to keep test mining if we get the permit, to start the tailings construction if we get the permit soon, and let's say the project finance isn't there. So this really allows us to hit the ground running when it comes to the construction and the de-risking of the project. But probably more important than that is that when you enter into project finance agreements with lenders, they often try to segment the amount of money that you can use. And if you have more money that you raise through equity, you're able to use more money for things that you want. And that, very importantly to us, is exploration. We want it to be really well funded for exploration so that we could continue to explore during the construction period. And if you recall, we acquired the Santa Fe project in the southern part of our district. And, we see the Santa Fe as being the next center of mass, the next growth center for Panuco, project number 2, let's say. And for us to really explore that and develop it in the way that we want to during the construction period, we needed to have equity in place. And so if you're a shareholder and you're looking at that financing, wondering why we did that, it's actually to continue to grow during a period where most companies actually don't grow, which is that construction period.
So I would like to touch base. You have some outstanding options that are in the money. What is the average price expired on those? How many are there? If you could give some indications on how much money you could expect to receive from having options exercised.
I think there's probably about $15 to $20 million of Canadian, let's say, of in the money options that probably could come in. The problem is, of course, is that we're really strong believers in the company, and so people will probably want to hold those until expiry. And I would say, for the ones that are in the money right now, the expiry is probably on average about 2.5 years from now. And then there's some longer dated ones, of course, but I would say the average strike price is somewhere between 220 and 225, let's say, in Canadian dollars, and probably the average expiry is about 5 years.
By the way, if you could give some more color on the type of shareholders that participate in the financing.
Well, we were very happy to bring back a shareholder that we had really since the discovery in the company, and their risk department, I think, looked at the Mexican elections. What was that, about 9 months ago, and they actually traded out of their Mexican equities. They came back in this financing, and they were our largest order and a group that's been very supportive of us. And that was, I would say, probably the most notable one because it shows a renewed strength and renewed confidence in Mexico. And very happy to have that shareholder back. And other than that, it was a lot of new groups, actually, a lot of groups that we had marketed to over the last few months. And what I really liked about this, and it's something that I've noticed with Mag Silver and Silvercrest and others, when you get to a certain point and you're dual listed with a Canadian and a New York listing, the New York listing starts to take over and become the primary listing. And for us, we are going to be primarily listed on the NYSE soon. and what we're doing Sarbanes-Oxley compliance and things like that. But a very broad base of this shareholder group was new groups that we had talked to, marketed to, that aren't exactly resource specialist funds. In fact, they're kind of multi-strategy groups, generalist investors that want exposure to the silver space and are primarily domiciled in the United States. So I think we're going to continue to see Vizsla Silver's trading primarily skewed towards the United States, which of course is the biggest investor base. So we're thrilled about that.
By the way, working cash is 250 million USD, and working capital is
That's right. Yeah, it's it's effectively that amount.
Okay. And what do you estimate the annual G&A to be going forward?
Well, for us, it's kind of interesting. You have basically a flat line of G&A of about $3 to $4 million US. Let's say to keep the lights on in Mexico, we have an operating underground mine that's 5x5. Teams in Mexico and Canada. But the G&A increases as we go into construction, and as we're preparing for construction here, that team in Mexico continues to grow. So, I think if the G&A goes from 3 to 4 to 8 million a year, that's a really good thing, because it means we're going right into construction here and cash flow. So, it's at a very healthy baseline right now. But as we continue to develop and even explore more, of course that will increase.
And how much do you expect to spend on exploration? Gold per quarter, if you could give some estimate, and also include, geophysics aren't sometimes cheap, so if aren't sometimes expensive, so include all type of exploration.
Yeah, well, I wish, I always wish it was more, of course, but we can only do so much a year. The geophysics, I believe, are somewhere around $1 million to do the entire property, which is relatively inexpensive compared to the tens of millions of dollars we spent historically in drilling. But this year we should spend upwards of $7 to $8 million US on total exploration, I would say, and that includes what we have planned for Santa Fe. Originally, we started the year with a budget of about $3 to $4 million, and that's continuing to grow, and part of that is just due to the success that we're having with new discoveries, and of course the new property that we have in the south there, Santa Fe, that we're going to explore this year.
Perfect. But this doesn't include any infill drilling or geotechnical drilling at, just to be clear, at Copala and some Napoleon.
Yeah,
Project 1.
The infill drilling right now, we're not doing any more infill drilling, and the reason for that is we're waiting until we get underground so that we can build our own drill stations on the decline and drill from underground. I think that'll be excellent. So whether that's very late this year or primarily starting in 2026, that'll be excellent. We're looking forward to that. The geotech drilling is more of a kind of feasibility engineering expense, and that has to do with project development, which is outside of that exploration expenditure.
What financing packages are you considering, and are you leaning towards any?
Well, this has been, I would say, this will be the most important decision we have to make. Obviously, before it really had all been around equity, and that's relatively straightforward. It's kind of more when and to who you issue that equity to. With this project finance will be a partner for us for at least a number of years, and we're really spending the appropriate amount of time looking at our options, and we've been very fortunate because we've had many options now that we've whittled down to a very short list on the lending side, and then what you could maybe refer to as kind of a different, more across the project financing package from another group. And so, I think there's probably strong precedent to look towards just a very plain vanilla project finance lending scenario where, you just have a project finance debt that you pay back rapidly with cash flow. But we are looking at various different structures as well too, and surprised at how attractive some of the cost of capital can be from alternative structures. So, I can't say too much because we're coming to a decision point here quite rapidly, I would say. But we have been working on this for about 18 months, and it's there's a lot that goes into it. In terms of the quantum, we're thinking. Originally we set out for term sheets of around $200 million US. And we were very careful to include in these term sheets, the ability to scale that amount, or, to look at, say up to $200 million where you can draw down on lesser amounts, but have that facility available for more. With the cash on hand and the CapEx, we don't, like I said, we don't expect the CapEx to increase in terms of, the dollar value. We expect it to be relatively in line with what we saw at the PEA. We can scale these amounts, and I think we'll find the right amount for us. But there is ample appetite to lend us money here, and we're just getting to that decision point now.
Okay, but somewhere around 200 million to have access to, at least.
I think that's probably safe to say. Yeah.
Awesome. And could you give us some time interval on when you would like to announce project financing?
Well, certainly by the end of the year. That's our goal, is to announce project financing by the end of the year, as well alongside of the feasibility study, which I expect we can announce before the end of the year as well.
You have an ATM in place that you have used a little bit in the past year. With this cash balance, how will you use it going forward?
Well, the ATM is off, definitively off. We're not using it. It was a really strong optionality and tool that we did have, and the way that we did use it over the last 12 months was to bring in larger shareholders. Basically, they would be looking for blocks of stock. Very hard to find blocks of stock in Vizsla, it was at the time. And so what we did, we would direct some of that trade onto the ATM, bringing cash into our bank, and then the rest, more than half, let's say, we would put through the market, so that the volume primarily would go through the market, but we'd also be able to add to our balance sheet. Now, because this equity financing has been complete, and it'll likely be the very last equity financing that we need to do, we're able to turn off that ATM. There's the possibility that we may have a news release relating to that in the future here, but we don't plan on using our ATM. And I think that's great, because it lets people know, lets the market know that the only way to buy the stock is on the market. There's no other way to buy it. There's going to be no more equity financing. There's no more ATM.
Perfect. So Vizsla Royalties, which you spun out last year, has bought a 3% royalty on the Silverstone concession. So essentially what you have now is that you have, which by the way covers a lot, the Copala vein, cost $40 million USD. So now Vizsla Royalties has consolidated all of the royalties in the Panuco district and holds between 2 to 3.5% NSR on the concessions. So you raised, as you said, 63 million Canadian to fund the acquisition. Could you give us the rationale for the royalty acquisition?
Yeah, we've created a lot of value historically in this district by consolidation and buying outstanding, originally concessions, and now in this case, royalties. And we originally had a buyback to buy 1.5% of that royalty from the vendor, who we later bought the 3%. And the reason for that is that we really wanted to back ourselves. We knew that this project was going to continue to get better. We knew that we'd prefer to have a 3% over a 1.5%. And it was better to do that in the Vizsla Royalty vehicle, so that Vizsla Silver was independent from that transaction. So by doing that now, we have really a world-class Tier 1 precious metals royalty over possibly one of I would say, the best new silver vein discoveries in the last 30 years at Copala. A 10-meter thick vein, 10-meter thick vein, which averaged grade over 500 grams per ton silver equivalent. Really a spectacular structure there. Really the backbone to our economics at Copala there. So, for us, it was us being Vizsla Royalty, let's say, it was a no-brainer to consolidate that royalty and now enhance the value of Vizsla Royalty. And really, the intention of Vizsla Royalty has always been to transact on that to pay down some of the capex that we might see. And I think there's, although it's worth about $30 million today for us, I see that value increasing to much higher. And I think this, if we look at transactions like Great Bear and Origin, recently in the royalty space. It's becoming a very acquisitive space, and we think that M&A is going to continue to heat up, and that we'll be able to transact on VROY, and Vizsla Silver will be able to monetize its position in VROY and strengthen the balance sheet even more. And if you look at the amount that could bring in versus the cash that we have on hand, it also lowers the risk in third party financing as well.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's valued at 30 million Canadian dollars. So, how do you see your shareholding in VROY? You have said that you would want to monetize that. Could you add some more color to that?
Yeah, I think probably the most straightforward way to monetize this, and remembering that we spun this out to Vizsla Silver shareholders. So Vizsla Silver shareholders are the other shareholders of outside of Vizsla Silver of Vizsla Royalty. So I think the most straightforward way is to transact on the company as a whole, and that there are many buyers that would be interested in purchasing VROY as a corporate transaction. So I think that's probably the most straightforward way. Of course, the other way to do that is for to do is basically a secondary offering of that stock to investors or corporate or whomever may be interested in that. And that's a way that's historically been a very attractive way to find liquidity as well. What you won't see, I believe, is you won't see Vizsla Silver selling its shareholdings into the market. I think that's very unlikely. But I know that there is a very strong market for these companies on an M&A front, where I think that the premiums that royalty companies get paid are high. The NAV multiples are excellent. So I think the most likely and probably the most attractive option is for a transaction on Vizsla Royalty as a whole. And I think it's probably important to note that we've had a lot of insider buying on VROY as well. So much so that the Globe and Mail wrote about it last week, and I bought about $1 million worth of VROY stock in the last month or so.
Similar to, or hopefully similar to, what Great Bear and Royal Gold did, or Royal Gold as acquirer. Yeah,
exactly, and that's that's what's interesting. And I think the way that we look at it and the rationale behind this is that we want to build Vizsla Silver into the next world-class multi-asset, huge silver producer. We don't want to sell Vizsla Silver, but we wanted to give our shareholders a win along the way, along the journey to building that, and some capital gains by spinning that out. And so that seems to be going very well, and we're committed to doing that. It's very exciting. And it's just another way for the shareholders to have more success out of Vizsla Silver.
So, by the way, finally on Vizsla Royalties, what's the current cash position of VROY and also burn rate?
Yeah, I believe it's around $7 or $8 million Canadian. Doesn't need a lot of cash because the burn rate is, I believe it's under $1 million a year. Low salaries, really no major expenses other than kind of legal and databases and things like that, to help support any transaction. So that really will not need to raise any more money going forward, but it's in a very strong position.
So, Panuco project, or project number 1, could you give us an update on the test mining program at Copala and the decline development?
Well, the test mine is going very well. I was just down there 2 weeks ago now, and was just so impressed by the development there. It's just, it looks extremely professional, and it is very professional because it's run by, first of all, our team, and then the contract miners that we have on site. And for us to go from discovery hole to very large scale exploration to now mining underground at the project has just been really incredible to see. And we're about 180 meters subsurface now, progressed along the decline. I should say we're 100 meters progressed along the decline, coming down into that 460 level where the test mine will be at Copala. And it's just been really, really well done and progressing very steadily. Of course, it's going to be great to get our eyes and our hands on the Copala vein, but it also allows us to test out our contractors, test out our team. And to your first or second question about our team, it helps us really understand where those pain points are, where we need to add to the team. And I have to say, the team's done extremely well, and we don't really need anything more on the mining front. We actually brought Simon Smirlik, our chief operating officer, his main construction manager, in from Australia. He's living at the project now. Every day he's at the test mine, making sure it works really well, and he's going to be the person that oversees all of the construction at the project as well. So for him to kind of let's maybe not say ease in, it's not that easy. It's still an operating underground mine, but to get set up at this test mine and then be ready when we're ready to break ground on the tailings and the mill construction is another way that we de-risk this project.
When would you like to be in ore or reach the ore zone at Copala with the test mining program?
Yeah, it should be by the end of the year is our goal. And that'll continue on into 2026.
I mean, you will get a lot of data by mining 10,000 tons, doing metallurgical testing on the ore, geotechnical testing, all that. Could those results potentially change anything like materially compared to the feasibility study?
No, I don't believe so. The reason for that confidence that things should be relatively the same not only has to do with Copala, and we've done an incredible amount of drilling at Copala, geotechnical holes, just in close space testing, multiple rounds of metallurgy. But we also know that the mineralization is consistent from other underground mines that we've seen in other veins across the district. So it's not like this is a project where one vein differs significantly from the other than the presence, let's say, of base metals. So we've seen consistency throughout the entire region, and so we're quite confident that what we see underground there, what we bring above surface, what we test for metallurgy, will be consistent with what we've seen already so far. And we have done many rounds, just kind of iterative metallurgical testing to make sure that that's de-risked. So we feel pretty confident in that outcome.
Will you from Copala create a tunnel that goes to Napoleon at some point?
We do have that option. That's something that we could do. However, we actually did permit another test mine added entrance at Napoleon, so we could use that. However, we're really just focused on Copala right now. Without saying too much, I think that Copala will continue to be a major part of the mine plan and the mine scenario sequence going forward. So, we're putting a lot of effort into Copala right now, and thinking that it'll continue to grow. And I think the reason for that is, if you think about our resource, which is about 360 million ounces between M&I and inferred, we only used about 168, 170 million ounces in the PEA mine plan. So that's about half. Those ounces are still there. Doesn't mean that they're not, mineable. It just means that they haven't been upgraded to those higher confidence categories yet. So we do see a lot more linear and depth extension of Copala, especially as you go north towards the Copala town as well.
Yeah, I mean, even now, Napoleon is first in year 4 to come into production, so it's a bit out compared to
exactly. Yeah. And I think, and of course, we'll have that updated mine plan as part of the feasibility study. So, I think there should be. It's unlikely things will be exactly the same as the PA. I think there should be some positive changes there.
Any areas where you expect changes or material changes in the feasibility study compared to the PA?
Well, one particular area that is quite exciting, and one that I was so thrilled about during the infill campaign, has to do with just that space in between our previous wireframe, the resource calculation, and then closer to surface at Copala. Actually,
where you had that added?
Yeah, I suppose there's an adit there. It never got into any meaningful mineralization, but we, in between there and the resource, we ended up, and then further to the south, we ended up drilling very large, high-grade additional resource there. So that'll be updated. That'll be closer to surface, higher grade, and we'll go into the mine plan, I think, at earlier days.
Excellent. Then, so feasibility study, that's planned for Q4, or?
That's right. Yeah, I would say so.
So right now, by the way, so there's no rig operating on project 1. You will wait until you get a tunnel or the decline in place. When do you expect to be able to get rigs again on Copala?
Well, there are rigs there now with geotech drilling, so that is happening. Where we are drilling right now with an exploration rig is actually very close to Copala, to the north at La Colorada. So we are doing some exploration drilling there, the kind of what we think is potentially the extension of Copala on the other side of the highway, to the north of the highway, to the north of the town. So we're excited about that. We're also, I think there is the potential for some fence drilling in that general area, which should be interesting to see what sits between some of these structures. What else is lurking below surface that doesn't outcrop and, we don't know about just yet. That's also complemented by the geophys that we're planning on later this year, or, at some point in the coming months, let's say. And then, of course, we have that discovery at Animas. And so we've done a lot of desktop work and just interpreting what that all means and how we go back to Animas to continue to expand that discovery there. It's a beautiful discovery. I think we'll continue to drill it, ideally starting very soon and then going into the end of the year and beyond. So there is a lot of discovery drilling potential within, let's say, the vicinity of project number one. We call that kind of near mine potential expansion, stuff that could feed that mill. And then also what could be project number two, let's say removing Santa Fe, but thinking about project number two in our district, could be over there at Animas. And then, of course, we're gearing up to go explore down at Santa Fe as well.
All in all, where are the rigs currently?
So north of La Colorada, north of Copala at La Colorada. And then we have a number of geotech rigs around the Copala area working on that engineering geotech work. And that's kind of the main focus right now. But we will have another rig moving over to Animas.
How many meters did you complete on in sort of the regional program and not the proximal program?
That's a good question. I know we had originally budgeted about 10,000 meters this year. We would have done, I think we would have gone north of half of that so far here. But really what's interesting about that program is that it's not fixed. We can continue to expand that. So I think that this year we'll probably expand past that 10,000 meters and of exploration, and we'll probably continue to drill and add more rigs as we continue to follow up on more success.
I mean, you will for sure go back to Animas. You have almost 6 meters of true thickness of 653 grams per ton silver and a little over 4 grams per ton gold. Quite shallow too, 100 meter below surface. I think you did drill like 2 or 3 holes into Animas. What is your thesis right now, and where and how will you attack this?
Well, the thesis, I believe, is that it shows the potential to be another ore shoot like we've seen there in Animas. And Animas was the first place that when the very first day that we went to the project back in early 2019, we went underground at Mariposa, which was this very, very large void space, an ore shoot that they had mined probably about 30 to 40 million ounces of silver equivalent out of. And, that sits relatively close to that new discovery. And these are kind of like pearls on a string, these ore shoots. And there's still mineralized material between them. It's just sometimes not as high grade, not as thick. What we think is that this is another very large ore shoot here and has depth extension down below where we drilled here. So, these things do take a bit of drilling. It's not, 1 or 2 holes doesn't really tell the whole story. So we don't know what we don't know right now. And we're excited to get back there drilling and find out more about what's going on. But we think that the upside here could very well be another very large ore shoot. And it could very well be, attached to something that's even bigger or feeder zone below. The upside is immense. What we know now is that there's a thick structure with nice high grades there.
Is there a geofix you would do, or what's holding you back from not drilling it right now?
Well, we're basically just mobilizing. We're getting ready to do that. So nothing holding us back. It was just more, getting. We wanted to test the Copala target, the Colorado target, pardon me, and moving the rigs over there, understanding kind of the orientation. And oftentimes these structures take a little bit of time to interpret in the context of all those other 7 or 8 ore shoots along that structure.
But the plan is for the fall to at least have 2 rigs split on between Project 1 and Project 2, or the hunt for Project 2.
Yeah,
Awesome. Yeah, what's the assaying time currently, and when do you essentially how in terms of news flows for assays? If you could give us some outline on that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think it's hard to say really because these things do take multiple holes, of course, to understand, and we're kind of beyond the point of putting one hole out and then the market responding to it. So the way that we like to do this is to gather enough assays to make a really informed announcement around where we see this resource, like we did at La Luisa. La Luisa is a good example of that. So I think we could probably see assays continuing through to the end of the year and beyond. As far as the next batch of assays, I'm not so sure. We're really focused on just understanding these things and putting out meaningful news releases around that in terms of center of mass and where that exploration is going to continue to. But I would expect to continue to see exploration news releases going into the summer and into the fall here at regular intervals.
And could you talk about the acquisition of the Santa Fe mine and the land package, and also explain the deal structure?
Yeah, absolutely. So the deal structure is structured as actually very similar to our original property options here, where we had a 2-year period before accelerating and acquiring the project for us to go and explore and find new centers of mineralization and grow resources. So we structured it with a 2-year window, starting, I guess, several months ago, where we would explore. After 2 years, we have the option for another 3 years to accelerate the purchase of the property. And by doing that, we kind of de-risk that acquisition as well. And if we're comfortable that we want to buy it, we can. If we figure that there's something wrong with it, or we're not as comfortable, or aren't as convinced about the upside there, we actually don't have to finalize the option, and we save some money and some shares. But this is basically a $16 million deal. It's primarily weighted towards equity and work commitments, with a small portion of cash as well. However, I am quite confident that we're going to find something really exciting here. I think this is the potential next 5 to 10 million ounce producer for Vizsla Silver down there in Santa Fe. And the way that we structured it is that we explore very aggressively for 2 years, and then we bring our build team off of Panuco and project number 1, and bring that build team down to the permitted operating mill at Santa Fe, expand that mill to something that could process and generate, like I said, 5 to 10 million ounces of silver equivalent to add to our production profile.
So that said, what work are you planning to do at Santa Fe this year?
Well, so far we've mobilized our community crew to the project to kind of get a feel for the area, understand the dynamics there, and bring our exploration team there, understand where to put the camp, and have people working. So that was the first step. The second step will be kind of a recon program where we set out to kind of reconfirm and understand the highest priority targets. One of the best things is that Dr. Jesus Velador, who's our vice president of exploration, has actually worked on that project in the past. Unfortunately, when the company that he was working with that was working there was during COVID, so they never really got any meaningful traction. And the way that they had structured it, the deal had stepped up into higher payments, and they weren't able to justify those higher payments. They were they're quite large payments. They weren't able to justify it because they simply just didn't do enough work. And metal prices increased. The project returned to the vendor. The vendor wanted to operate and benefit from those higher metal prices. And over the last 4 or 5 years, I built a good relationship with the vendors there, and they're now large shareholders of Vizsla. They really want to see, they're really tied to the success of Vizsla. So they're really helping us get settled, get situated, start that phase 1 exploration, which is more kind of reconnaissance and groundwork. I hope by the end of the year we're drilling there, and I think that's the intention from the team. There seem to be some really strong walk-up targets from past work there, so we're excited about that.
Actually, maybe my most important question: could you give us an update on the permitting process?
Well, yeah, that is a very important question. It's really, the only outstanding question in terms of, I believe, the success of the company. And it's something that we're very confident that we're going to get the permit. We're not one of those companies that will kind of promise a time frame other than what we put in our presentation, and that's about 12 months from now is when we expect to get the permit. Of course, we submitted for the permit about 5 months ago, so we're giving ourselves a very long fuse, very long time frame to get the permits, and that time frame is far outside of the statutory time frame. But we have the groups in our, how should I say this? The team that's actually working directly with the government in Mexico, working with Semirnat, have been very encouraged by the responses that Semirnat's given us so far. And they seem to think that we're going to get the permit in a relatively short time frame. Of course, I've made a habit of under promising and over delivering, and I think it's best to just stick to the time frame that we set out on our presentation, which is 12 months from now we expect to get it. However, there's a lot of reasons for optimism regarding the permit. I would say the biggest one is that this has always been an underground mining district. Underground mines don't have the same issues in terms of perception that open pits do in Mexico. This is a 400-year mining district where the Spanish have been mining, locals have been mining. This is an area that has hills and that are dotted with tunnels and old mines and old mill stations. And as a matter of fact, over the last 3 or 4 years, we remediated an old tailings facility at our own cost. We're great citizens of this district. Community's very much on side, and all the areas that we could for the permit, we used previously disturbed land. So we used areas that were previously mined, areas that were previously used for agriculture, and that's much easier to permit in Mexico than a fresh area. And there's other considerations such as the fact that this doesn't have the same water issues that other places in Mexico have. This is a very wet region. Most of the water that we're going to use, we get from underground sources or from rainwater capture. So, if you look at that in Semirnat and you look at that as Claudia's government that wants to see industry, enhanced and wants to see revenues and more tax revenue and those types of things, more employment. This is actually a very easy project for Semirnat to permit. We think that it's going to be very straightforward. So far, our experience has been very positive with Mexico.
By the way, in terms of permitting, are there any particular steps? Like, have Semirnat done their technical due diligence, been on site, or is that still a continuous process that's ongoing? And are there any particular area that is more where there are more questions around?
Well, we've progressed through those sections right now. Actually, the most questions that we had were the first submission, but of course, this has been an iterative process that we've worked with Semirnat over the last 6 or 7 years in the project here. So I should say 6 years in the project. So they're quite familiar with what we're doing, and we were involved with those authorities as we were remediating those tailings. They weren't our tailings to remediate, but we did that as generating goodwill and showing good stewardship of the district. So it was actually relatively straightforward when we submitted, and the bulk of those questions came early on. Right now, we're actually just in that kind of review process where it's actually less interactive and more of a statutory time frame that we go through.
Perfect. So could you summarize then the catalysts over the coming year?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So the big view and big goal here is that by the end of 2027, we're going to be in cash flow. We'll be we'll be producing silver with first silver. In 2028, as per the PEA, we'll be producing 20 million ounces of silver equivalent. And, our AISC is $7.40 in those first 2 years as per the PEA. So that's almost, it is a $30 margin at today's metal prices. So the cash flow there is enormous, 20 times 30, 20 million times 30. So that's kind of the big view, the big goal. Now, in order for us to get from that beautiful cash flow profile and producing the most silver equivalent ounces for any single asset listed company in silver space, we need to do a few simple things. One of those is, raise a little bit more money through project finance, which would be non-dilutive to shareholders, and then we need to publish a feasibility study. We need to receive our permits. And that'll have us go from right now trading at about 0.7 times NAV to probably trading at a NAV multiple 2 times our existing NAV multiple, what we've seen in the past. Silver producers in Mexico always command a premium. Well, high quality ones, I should say, always command a premium. And there's reasons to believe that, we'll be one of the very highest quality out there. Certainly the highest quality one that exists. All the others were taken over at between 1.6 and 1 times NAV in recent memory. And then, the big upside, the unknown, really comes from more discovery, more growth, more organic growth off of our existing property package here. In the last 6-7 months, we've gone from a 7,000 hectare project to now 40,000 hectares along this incredibly underexplored but extremely endowed silver district that we've consolidated ourselves. And then as well, there is the catalyst of transacting on Vizsla Royalty to generate more non-dilutive equity for the project build here and de-risking the project even further.
So to my final question, which I always ask, where do you envision Vizsla Silver in a year from now?
Well, in a year from now, I believe we'll be in construction and probably have made a few other new discoveries in the district as well. I've sold Vizsla Royalty and cash position being very, very strong, liquidity being very, very strong, and able to build this with very few hiccups and get into very large cash flow.